So, I'm the Honorable Elizabeth A. Baker, currently a Harvard Radcliffe Institute Fellow. Um, and today, as part of my field studies project, I am talking to wonderful human Melissa Harris Chambers, who also is the master who masters basically almost everything that I release publicly. And so, yeah, Melissa is a mastering engineer at Sonopod Mastering, which was started by our mentor, Dave Greenberg. And oh, yeah, Melissa and I went to school together. So we've known each other for over a decade, something like 13 years, a very, very long time. And so nobody knows more about my musical journey and sort of field studies and recording and all that sort of stuff than Melissa. So, um, hello, Melissa.
Hi.
Cool. Well, yeah, now that we've gotten all the housekeeping out of the way, um, I guess the first thing people probably need to know is like, what is a mastering engineer?
Well, a mastering engineer is someone who does audio mastering. And so we'll start there. That is the last stage of production in music production or audio production, really. Um, and a lot of people don't quite understand. It's kind of shrouded in mysticism for a lot of people of what it is. So we'll just talk about that briefly. One thing is it making it the correct loudness. Like a lot of people just equate mastering with loudness and getting it to the right levels. That's one thing. Making it the correct loudness in relation to standards that exist, and also how the music or the piece's peers show up in the real world. There needs to be some sort of relative loudness to that. And so going backwards from that, or not backwards really, but beyond just the loudness are things like issues. There could be issues. The piece before me has been recorded somewhere by someone else, mixed somewhere, usually by someone else. And within those environments is the possibility for an imperfect room and imperfect speakers, and either making us hear things bigger than they are or not loud enough uh, because of just acoustic principles in the room. So we work in a specialized environment that has been treated to be as accurate as possible with high-end monitors that are also accurate as possible. So really what you hear is there, and you hear everything that's there. So that's important in terms of, not that the mix engineer didn't have, special ears to hear these problems, or the recording engineer, but it possibly wasn't physically possible in the room that they were at. And also, when it comes to me, I'm listening to it in a different way than the record engineer and the mix engineer, where in those stages you're focused on different things than what a mastering engineer is focused on sonically. So issues like that, there could be big resonances that aren't supposed to happen. Um, or, a sound of something being scooped, where you can sit here, oh, they thought they heard a problem and EQ'd something too much. And we might need to put a little energy back there. There could be little clicks that aren't supposed to be there, discontinuity clicks, stuff like that are issues that we correct. Um, Overall sweetening, just sort of making it the best that it can be, letting that piece fulfill its potential. And someone could say, well, how do you know what that is? Or how do you know what sounds are not supposed to be there or are? And beyond having a background and knowing music, a lot, basically a lifetime of being immersed in music, um, all different types, you start to get a sense of Okay, you can hear the intention in the piece, um, which is interesting with some of your stuff that we did. There are little clicky noises and stuff from some of the microphones that you used, for instance, underwater, for instance, little clicks and stuff that in a typical recording studio wouldn't be there, but those are intentional.
They're the
So
fish.
I left those. Yeah, they were fish. Yeah.
Most people don't know that fish, they just make clicking sounds.
Yeah, they just make clicks when they bump into the microphone. So,
They have something
um,
with their gills. It's like it's weird.
oh,
Yeah. So like their way of speaking is like a click click to us. And I'm pretty sure it's because like they're in a register of human hearing that like we
we
don't
don't get, yeah.
don't get the full resonance of that. But yeah, that's how they talk. Sometimes they blow bubbles, but mostly they just make these clicking sounds.
Okay. Yeah, I knew it was fish, but I didn't know it was them
Yeah,
talking. That's
some
cool.
fish make croaker sounds. Like there's a Florida fish, the croaker, and the croaker actually doesn't click. It like croaks almost like a
Okay,
frog, but like a frog submersed underneath water. It's very strange.
that's cool. Yeah. So, um, knowing knowing what you're working with, because it's not like me or Dave, we don't have a sound. There's not a sonic imprint. We work under the knowing that by the time it got to us, a lot of people like it. A lot of people said yes. After it got recorded, a bunch of people said, yep, cool. It's ready to go to the mix engineer. Mix engineer did the work. Everybody listened. Maybe they had revisions. They said, okay, cool. Yeah, we've got it. Now let's send it off. So you never want to make any huge changes or adjustments because that's not what we're there for. Some, that's me personally. Some, I can't speak for every mastering engineer in the world because there are definitely some that, this rock sound from this guy, myself, I stick with the intention of the piece that was given to me.
Mhm.
Um, so there's all that, all the sonic stuff. And then there's all the other side of it, which is like embedding any metadata that you may have, which is can be anything from who wrote it and composed it to what DAW you used or record company, or we can put anything that you need in there. And then getting it ready for every format that it's going to go to. So right now, most of my deliveries are all Apple Digital Masters. And I used to have certain limiter settings for like the CD format, and then we'd have to change it a little bit to make sure it was, well, mastered for iTunes at the time, but now Apple Digital Masters. So I most of the things are streamed nowadays. So I just everything is delivered as could be an Apple Digital Master, but in a streamable loudness with nothing to worry about there. But then some people may want to have it distributed on vinyl as well. And so then we don't cut lacquers at our studio. We would make a pre-master for vinyl where we would have to change some limiter settings and some EQ settings or add some EQ to make sure that we don't have any big things that happen that might make the needle pop out of the groove or make something bad happen when they put it on vinyl.
Yeah. And
So,
to recap a little bit, because I know there are people who are going to be like, oh my gosh, there's so many words that I don't know what they are. So, like,
oh,
just for the metadata, like when you put your CD in the car, like, or you put your CD in the computer, or you pull up the file on the computer, that's basically Melissa's putting all the information that you see so you know what the track name is, plus many other things.
yeah. So part of that's the CD text,
Mhm.
which, yeah, we can call that all one umbrella of the metadata technically what the CD player reads is not the metadata, even though it can't, it reads the CD text, but yeah, it's all that stuff, but like more and deeper, read by machines that then say, okay, this belongs to Elizabeth. Let's make sure Elizabeth gets paid.
Yes, yes. And then of course with the needle jumping, I just think about all the low end.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So some stuff, you know, especially modern stuff that has a lot of low end, we really have to make sure that we're not going to send anything out that is, okay, here you go. Yeah, send it to the lacquer cutter. And then, well, they check it too, you
Yeah.
know. So we call that a pre-master for vinyl, but it is after we have mastered it with all of the previous steps.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to see if I forgot anything. I think that's basically the gist of it, though, is to,
That's the gist of it without us saying the controversial things about CD quality and
oh,
MP.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so Melissa makes magic happen because without all of it's such an important job that is so overlooked, you know. So many people don't include like in their budget for things like even a mastering engineer. But then they release their stuff and it's like it's not as good as it could have been if
Right.
it had been touched by a professional mastering engineer.
Yeah. A lot of people don't understand. And so they'll just get a mastering limiter plugin and think that that's all there is to it. And then they say, oh, yep, I made it loud. Um,
Nope, it's more than that. It's a
it's
craft.
more than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's way more than that. Yeah. So mostly I say I serve the vibrations, really. That's what I do in all aspects of audio, but especially this one is how can I be of service to these vibrations that have been given to me? Um, so we really sort of listen into it, you know, and bring out everything that it wants to be brought out.
I think of especially the way that you go about mastering, like, you know, when an oil painter puts that final layer on and it brings out all of the little details, but it makes the colors more vibrant and everything, like that is what you do with mastering.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah, I make
That's what
something,
I try to do.
Melissa just makes it better.
Thank you.
um so yeah, field studies. So many weird things. I feel like I've thrown at you some very interesting sounds, and I think it's you know a lot of times when people are thinking about records or video or movies, because we've collaborated on many things throughout the years, um, they're thinking about sounds that are made in a studio and that are isolated, not perfect, because we know sometimes people don't put mics on things the way they should. Um, but like sounds that is mostly isolated for a specific purpose versus all of the sound coming in and that being part of the portrait. And so I don't know if you could speak to like how your mind goes into this, what has to be like a little bit of a different place um, when you're not dealing with isolated sound.
Yeah, and it is different. In one aspect, it that difference makes it more difficult and easier at the same time, in different ways, you know, because it's not like there's nothing to compare it to. It's not like, oh, that's what they were going for. Yeah. I mean, I know what you were going for, but there's not, it's not like a modern piece of pop music that you could say, okay, we need to be over in this area. So my mind, first I listen, obviously, and I feel, you know, I feel I this is where maybe I would lose some of my listeners, but for me, um, it is there is a feeling with everything that I hear, and I can just sort of tell, you know, like, okay, that feeling was made on purpose. Let's how can I translate that better? How can I say, okay, well, I see what's going on. There's all these noises over here. Now there's this engine noise. I'm getting really uneasy with this noise. I would say, okay, well, it's Elizabeth. This noise is on purpose. This is supposed to be here. This uneasiness is supposed to be here with all these clicks, or with all the fish and all of the other stuff, talking about this, the same project that we've, not the same. There's been lots of these sounds in a lot of things, but yeah, it's sort of with your work, it's just diving into putting myself sort of in that place. Where were you and what's going on? And with hearing this, how do I want to feel? What do I want to intensify? And what, again, with going along with your intention, not just like, I think this should be like this because I like it better that way. It's like I said, oh, I'm feeling some anxiety from this, and then it's going to be resolved over here. So let's see how I can help push that just a little bit, more. And so then I'll say, okay, sonically, I can turn this up or turn this down, from your stereo file usually too. So stuff with EQs, and in yours a lot, I use MS processing, and that's not even getting into where the stuff that we've done that's spatial audio and 360, because that's very fun. You can really put yourself into a space better. But yeah, with yours, first I just listen and feel, and this is kind of how I approach everything. Then as I'm listening and feeling, I will notice any big issues will jump out, and I will tame anything that needs to be tamed. And then I can sort of feel, when you fix things or tame certain things, there's an energy lost. So then I say, where can we put that energy back? And it's sort of a game like that of taking and giving and balancing until it feels like it should. And I realize those are not sciencey words. I'm having a hard time
It's okay.
articulating, like, how do you know when you're done?
It's
Like,
this. I feel like we're going through the same process. Like me improvising in space is this. It's the same way. Is like I'm tapping into the energy of the space. Okay, this feels like the ending point, and then you're going through a similar process, but with a different set of gear,
yeah,
which I don't think we've ever talked about that before. Which is very interesting to me. Is that we're both really just feeding off of the energy of the experience, uh,
yeah,
which is I think how we should be making a lot of things. But um, I find that really interesting. And then I have questions like now I'm like, how does the energy of the space come across to you? Because I think that's where I am now, really in my practice, is that I'm not interested in the musicy things of like, you know, a riff or chord progressions or even what tuning system we're in. I'm really interested in this like through line of energy that exists in the world and somehow putting that into like a little time capsule and then
yeah.
sending the time capsule to you to open it and sort of like a curator in an art museum that's like putting things back together to make it the truest picture of what it originally was. I feel like it's that, like this.
Yeah, that is, and that's how I kind of look at it, because to me, and you could expand this. I'm going to use the word music, but you could expand it to any of the stuff you do, any of the sounds that we make and capture. Not only is it sort of like time travel in the way that a photograph is. Again, I know this might be a stretch for some people, but you're listening to a moment in time that is no longer there. So that's one thing. Um, and beyond that, recordings and music and audio in the way that we understand it and use it is very unique to humans. So that's special to me. That's got to mean something. And it's all an expression of energy. And I believe that everything is energy because, in my opinion, that's an undeniable fact based in science is that every everything has energy and nothing can be completely destroyed to absolutely nothing,
Mhm.
right? So keeping that in mind, um, sorry, I'm easily distracted and there's a window out here. People, things going on. So I agree with you a lot because that's sort of like how I forgot where I was going with all that, but like that's really why it's also special to me and why I say I serve the vibrations because regardless of the creator or God or whatever that anyone believes or doesn't believe in, it's the expression of that of something that we have that no other beings on this planet have or have the ability to do. And I think it's amazing and special. And it is all energy. And that's why I say I serve the vibrations because that's what you're doing. You're doing stuff with them, giving them to other people, give them to me. We make it. Now other people can listen to that. And there's the energy from the sounds that were actually happening and all the energy you put into it and your intentions with your creating the mix as how you do and my energy and then it goes to other people and it's all done on purpose and from for me from a place of love.
Mhm.
So yeah, I agree with you basically. That is what we're doing.
Yeah. And I think also, having the background, so both going to the same production school, having the same teachers. We have some of the same processes about going about certain things. Um, but I feel that if there's one thing that we, or at least I learned within production school, was not to discount any sound. And I think that really, like when we're talking about like energy and love being through everything, it's like each sound is there. And not necessarily did I intentionally put it there, but like it is purposefully there as
Yeah.
part of the moment. And that we don't really try to put these in a box like on the grid. I,
Yeah.
I mean, at least not in this part, but I
No,
just
no.
remember like always being in Dave's class and being like, I just want to make art music. I don't want to make stuff that's on the grid. I
On the
just
grid, yeah.
want sounds to be sounds.
Yeah, live in slip mode.
Live in slip mode forever. But yeah, I mean, I think it's this understanding that you because a client can put forth any sound, really. You never know what you're going to get until you get
Yeah,
it. That there's almost this understanding that there isn't a hierarchy of like these sounds are better than these sounds. It's just sound. And
yeah,
like a level of peace when you start applying that to your life. Um, that I think I found in I think that's where I found that in production school of like which seems like a very odd place to be when we're trying to put a lot of stuff on grids and arguing about Beat Detective and Elastic Audio.
yeah. Yeah, but those were just skills to learn.
Yeah, I mean
Tools.
there were many I was present for a debate that you weren't where somebody who was very wrong, I'm going to say it on record now, they were very wrong was like it's better to elastic audio drums. And for the people that are out there, it's like elastic audio is like a rubber band. So like once you stretch the rubber band past a certain point, it's not going back ever. So why you would want to do that with a transient specific situation
Thing.
doesn't make any sense. That's why they created Beat Detective, even though it's still not. 100%. Um,
Yeah.
you know, but I just remember that very heated debate of elastic
Yeah.
eye being
I
drawn.
can I'm pretty sure I know who I could probably guess.
Yep, yep, yep. And I just remember the person who had to fix that, and I was like, I feel so sorry for you. Having to go in the mirror and fix all of those rubber band
Yeah.
drums. But yeah, would you say that how you experience natural sound, like just walking around, is different now that your ear is more honed as like a mastering engineer? Like, do you?
Yeah. Um it definitely is. I choose to I mean I definitely hear yeah. I have trained my ears to hear very specific things. So there are times when I'm out in the world and there's stuff that will really bother me. I'm very sensitive to noises, loud and lights too. You know, that's you can't really tell in here, but all the lights are off. The natural light is what I would prefer most of the time. But yeah, I do hear things differently. I try to turn off some of those parts when I can. Sort of like, have you ever been around someone? This happens to me a lot. Say you're around someone who does live sound and there will be watching a movie and somebody it's there's nothing plugged in or whatever but they're and I'm well I would rather just like I get it, I get what they're trying to say imagine a person doing this thing. I am not the person that's going to be like dummies, they didn't even do that, that's not realistic. And well and it's like no like I'm not like that as far as like walking around being like problem that's not because that is
Mhm,
just I don't want to be there all the time.
mhm,
Um, but yeah, I definitely hear thing walking around. I try to hear you realize there is no silence really. You can go to a special place to get silence, but in our world, any place that I have access to go to,
mhm,
there's no silence. There's no ever even just one sound, it's there's 100 things.
mhm,
So yeah, I can choose when I'm walking around to really dissect and get into that, and sometimes I do, but then sometimes that can easily turn into hypervigilance, which is maybe possibly I have had a lot of that in my life where I've learned growing up to be hypervigilant.
mhm,
Um, so maybe that I don't know it's chicken or the egg, but if I am out and about and try to listen to too many things, and start to be like, oh, what's that,
yeah.
don't want to go there all the time.
I've found it makes a lot of sound come to the foreground that normally would be in the background for people. Um, which I find like these really beautiful moments, and then weirdly don't feel like I need to record them. Like it's just like that's a precious moment that I like you were walking on a hike and you
Yeah.
see a flower. Like this weekend I was in Chicago and the wind was doing Chicago things. And I was out by the Midway airport. And so they have all of those big steel pipes and like railroad tracks. And
Oh,
the wind was going through the pipes in such a way that you would get these pitches, like this sort of,
yeah.
and it was, you could hear it for a long way, for miles actually, if your hearing was sensitive enough. So it was really interesting to like have this backwash of these, you know, oscillating pitches every so often.
Yeah.
But that's not a sound that most people would be like, hey, you remember the
Yeah.
pipes? But I think that when you become a little bit more attuned to, you know, listening for those things in recordings, you get those wonderful moments in real life where it's like, oh, that's cool.
Yes.
Or like there's a point in Harvard Yard where when the plane flies towards the airport,
Okay.
Same time that two of the churches have their bells ring, the plane and the air and they basically bounce off each other, and there's
Okay.
like a sustained tone for about 5 seconds, glorious 5 seconds. um but it's magical. But again, that's not something most people would, one, I think, be able to focus in on, because that point of Harvard Yard is also where all the buses and all of the children are walking to, the yard. Um, and so unless you can hear those far off things and kind of make them closer, you miss them. But
Yeah.
when you do start hearing those things, kind of pulling the Pauline Olivero sound walk thing, I think it's almost like an addition to life. It's like life plus.
I agree. And conversely, the ability to tune in or to tune out,
Hmm.
which we don't always have. My ability to tune out, as far as in the not when I'm working, but in
Hmm.
life, really depends on like a lot of factors. But if everything, let's say, if it's a not crazy stress day, those days it's easier to tune out and say, I'm only going to listen to the sounds I want to listen to. They're still there,
Hmm.
but it's that tuning. The tuning in, I guess, is equally tuning out, so you could listen to the noises, the sounds you were just describing, and tune out the children.
Yep.
Sometimes the tuning out of the children is hard to do, but
I can't imagine. I can't imagine. I kind of want to delve into that a little bit more, because I think that many people, um, they might be wondering about like what, like the tuning in, tuning out. How are you able to sort of put a spotlight on specific things and not focus on the other things? Um, Whether that's learned or whether you worked on that somehow. I think that that would be a question that somebody would probably ask.
yeah, I think it's yeah, I think I don't know. I think I would say I don't think it is. There's nothing about me that's not human. You know what I mean? As far as I know. Um, so I feel like it is learned, um, a practice type thing. One of my earliest memories regarding this type of thing was like in kindergarten and all through elementary school, we had a music teacher. And one of the first things, this had to be kindergarten or first grade based on my memory of like what room I was in. And she would bring in her cart with all the different, a bunch of different instruments. And then she would play music and we would have to listen into it and say, okay, now I want you guys to name all the instruments that you hear. Um, and that's not as easy as you think maybe for a 5 or 6 year old. To us, we can say, oh yeah, I hear this and this and this. But there's a lot, there's a lot that it takes to get to that point. First of all, knowing what the instruments are, but that's neither here nor there. But the really like the focus on, okay, yeah, you hear violin. Okay, well, what else? Do you hear that? Oh yeah, just that's sort of my earliest memory of doing that stuff. So that's why I kind of think it can be a learned. It's just paying attention to the details. It's sort of the difference between my example earlier, watching a movie, taking it for what it's supposed to represent, and not nitpicking the details of why it's correct or incorrect when it's irrelevant to the storyline. It's sort of the opposite of that. Some people can listen to music, and on our casual listening, we're listening to it as one thing, as really one entity, really. Um, so I think that there are people who only ever listen that way, probably.
Hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that, but um, I think it's just paying attention, sort of critically thinking and critically listening. Um, and that also comes with the opportunity of going back to being a 6-year-old or something, if you don't know what if you were never taught, here's these instruments, which some people were very lucky, we have had privilege in music and in the arts. There are some people who, for whatever reason, that they don't have any access to anything, and it's not valued in their families.
Mhm.
So if you don't know that inside of an orchestra is, let's say, a violin and a cello and all these other things, then you would just say, oh, that's just the orchestra. But no, no, well, what do you hear in the orchestra? If you've never been taught what those things are, then you can't tune in and tune out. It's just all one thing. I don't
Mhm.
know if that's answering the question, but I think it's a
No,
practice thing.
yeah. I mean, and it's something that somebody could do actually, not even just with an orchestra. Like if you only encountered the city, what are the
Yep.
specific sounds in the city? And it's something that, you know, I imagine like a parent could probably make that into a game for children to
Yeah.
amuse them for a while. Like what are the sounds in this space that we're in? Um, and it's
Yeah.
a game you could do for yourself
That's
if
true.
you
Yep.
have attention issues. Because like sometimes I'm in a space and it's like, what can I do to calm myself down? Well, let's just break down what we're hearing. And it takes your attention off of whatever
True.
might have been making you anxious at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's equal, yeah, learned and uh just pay yeah. I wish there was something else I could say besides like, oh, you just gotta pay attention, because that sounds kind of like if you can't do it, you're not trying hard enough. But it's like
No,
at some point you do have to try, because it is hard, but it helps sometimes if people point out and say, well, what about you hear that thing, that's do you hear that, and then you hear that bird that's going doo, 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 like, oh, I didn't hear that until you told me. And then they hear it, and I've learned so much in professional audio with examples like that, as far as like getting into recording and mixing and mastering, more so mixing and mastering. You can't Sometimes you just don't know stuff until you don't know it, and you can't hear stuff until someone says, you hear that? Nope. Well, here, let me exaggerate
yeah,
the bad part about this or whatever it is. And then that sort of helps. So it's yeah, it's natural and learned, I think.
yeah. I think of the drug mixes of the 80s, like when it was like, oh, why is there a boost at 2K in all of these recordings? Um, so for
Yeah.
people that don't know, there if you go back to the 80s and you listen to recordings, there are many of them that have a boost in a specific frequency range because certain drugs, we will not talk about which ones they are, but certain paraphernalia causes listening abnormalities, and
It feels good.
they just kept boosting that to make it feel better, and that's why we
Yeah.
have those mixes. But yeah, which also then brings in so many things about like not illicit drugs, but then think about like the many drugs that people take because they're prescribed. What does that do to their experience of listening? Um,
Yeah.
I have many questions on that, and
I
maybe
think it yeah, I think a lot, because a lot of those things, illicit and prescribed non-illicit drugs, have if we're talking about brain altering ones, they change the levels of chemicals in your brain, which also changes how you feel, how you feel stuff. And so yeah, I some of those, and I've been on some, antidepressants a decade ago that were numbing to the point of like, nah, no thanks. Like, I'm not saying that anyone who takes antidepressants and is numb should not take them, but for me personally, um, I'm trying, it's kind of like nothing was as good, including music, including good things, because my capacity or the ability for my brain to give me its natural stuff that it normally was, and the amounts was altered. So that can be good. That can be good and bad.
I wonder like if somebody with like AES will like ever do a study. I mean, they've done the study now on like the CD quality versus vinyl. Did you see that?
I
Um,
think so, yeah.
yeah. So, and it proved the psychoacoustics of people being like, yeah, it's better on vinyl, but like, no, it's really not.
Yeah.
You just have more memories of vinyl, and that's how we got there. Or you're a hipster, that's fine. Um,
Yeah.
but I really, now that we're having this discussion, like I really wonder how that colors people's perception of sound and the world around them. Because sound is such an important part of figuring out the space, like the how much space is in a place,
Hmm.
feeling safe because of the amount of assumed space around you. All of that, the psychoacoustics of things that we don't really ever talk about, um, which artistically can be manipulated, or
Yep.
you know, it really puts questions in my mind about like,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be cool if some sciencey people, did the sciencey things to find answers, or not even
Yeah.
answers, but just like what is happening. Um,
I'm sure that I feel like you would think somebody has done something like that. Um, because I can, yeah. I
I
don't
say
I feel like
no.
it's a good questions.
Being at Harvard with MIT people, I can probably say no.
No.
But it is something that I think that people should dig into. They do a lot with like cognitive behavior, but I feel like sound is so understood and simultaneously misunderstood, as a physiological thing, um,
Yeah.
that there's probably not. I mean, probably not, because nobody's gonna, not nobody, very few people fund it. And what I've learned from academia is that we only fund papers that can later be used for capitalist purposes, like making medicines,
Mm.
or creating treatments. So I doubt, because it's not an easily, like I can't jump to the product that gets made from that
Yeah.
research very easily. So I
You're
doubt
right.
that it's being researched extensively enough that there's a published paper that I could access on it.
Yeah. It's a good thought though.
I'm like Shark Tank for academia. I don't want to actually do the research. I just want to be like, hey, did you think about this thing? Now you
Yeah.
go take care of it, because I'm a millennial and can't commit to that much responsibility. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, because you're right. There's a lot with the behavioral, which I guess sort of is psychological, but not in the versus medicated versus unmedicated. But I think we all know that like there are certain songs you can put on to make you in a good mood. And there's certain ones that you can put on when you're in a bad mood to make that bad mood worse, you know?
I would get even deeper. I would be like, so like, okay, just gonna throw out known people because it's easier than throwing out people that are not. But like, Zeppelin feels dark. It is a dark mix all the time. Psychologically, a lot of people, you listen to Zeppelin when you're having, the sads. But how does your ear hear Zeppelin versus like a very poppy, um, bright mix of today? And I can't think of a bright mix of today, because I don't really listen to pop music of today. But um, oh, like the Smile that just came out, like Radiohead, is a very, to me it feels always very bright, compared, bright and clean. Um,
Hmm.
like how does your ear hear that, and
Hmm.
what does that do to your brain is the secondary thing. But how does it hear? And like, how do we, we know something feels dark, like we hear it as dark. What is dark? We don't. Like,
Yeah, it
is,
depends in which sense of
yeah,
the word.
yeah. Like, what is a dark sound versus what is a bright sound?
Oh,
You,
well, the
you,
high, yeah. I would say, I don't want to say technically, but that's the word I'm going to say. I think when a lot of people are talking about that specifically, they're talking about the high end.
mm-hmm,
Um, and to some extent, the sharpness of the transients, possibly
mm-hmm,
mid range to high end. So there's that, but you could have sparkly, shiny high end and still be very dark,
mm-hmm.
you know, content wise.
Yep, yep. Very interesting things that we've.
Yeah.
We came to talk about the nature and the sound, and then we entered a land of like, what is science doing with all of these questions that I have? Yeah.
Maybe something.
Maybe. I mean, I'm at Radcliffe, so if there's any place for an interdisciplinary conversation of like, what what is happening that has like access to resources like fMRI machines and whatnot to like try to figure out those things, it's really Radcliffe.
Yeah,
I
true.
might I might snag a scientist next week and be like, I had some questions. It'd be great if you could just, do your sciency thing and
Yeah, figure it
get
out.
back to me. Get back to me in like 2 years.
Yeah, that's all it should take. 2 years.
2 years, two
Easy.
years, 2 years. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything that you would want to say that I haven't like covered?
No, I think yeah, I think that, well, I will say that I don't share a lot of my process or is my feelings, with not every client can handle all of that. So I'm glad that you can, and whoever watches this, I hope that you can too. Not everyone I tell, I could hear their intentions and they don't care, but they just say, here's this song I made, and then I do what I do and they love it. Um, and so there's nothing wrong with that either. And there's also nothing wrong with the people that there's stuff I've worked on where the intention has not been maybe the same place, coming from the same place that it would be if I were to make a piece of music, or it could be from a purely capitalistic standpoint of the reason that this thing was created. But that doesn't mean that I can't still, that it's not still special and an expression of something that only humans get to do. So I think it's pretty cool. But yeah, basically, thank you for letting me tell you all the weird things that I think and feel about audio.
I mean, I feel like these are not discussions that we have a lot. They're definitely not discussions that are had a lot with women engineers either, and I think that that was really important. Um,
Yeah.
so, like, it's it gives you hope and is fulfilling to see someone who looks like you doing something that you really look up to, and a place that you hope to see yourself in the future. Or it's also just really
True.
comforting seeing yourself doing like somebody else doing the same thing you're doing, and just reassuring that you're not alone in a field that is heavily
Yes.
dominated by men.
It is. Yeah, it definitely is. And that's one of the reasons why I started also teaching at the college, is because I'm the only one that that is like me. So I almost feel like you said, if you can see it, representation does matter. Um, and things don't change quick, unfortunately, but it is important to, I guess, be seen,
Hmm.
you know, um, and to be genuine and authentic in that. um, and not, you know, unfortunately, we are all still viewed as woman first. It's like, I don't want to say everyone, not everyone says, oh, wow, that's a female engineer. But let's face it, a majority still do.
Hmm.
I'm a woman first before anything else, you know? And I personally feel like that's irrelevant. Um, which is why also I haven't done a lot of things that usually I've been asked by men to do things about, like, well, do you want to talk about being a woman in a male dominated industry? Like, no. Like, we'll put you on a stage. Like, you guys, uh, it fucking sucks.
Yeah.
Partly because you're asking me to do this. Like, you're different. You want to go talk about different to a whole group? Like, and we'll ask you questions about, like, so
And
how do you balance taking care of your kids and going to the office?
there's the culture around audio still, even the way that things are spoken about, you know, is so very heavily gendered and skewed towards men. Like, I think I was watching a video for something, like it was, I don't know, it was a piece of gear, like a gear demo. Um and the guy, older guy, was like, "Yeah, and then you send it to your guy." And I'm like, "No. No. No." And like he just kept saying, he's like, and then your guy sends you the thing." And then I'm like, "No. No,
Yeah.
because it's not always a guy." And I think that it's so very interesting because I feel like in audio, it's talked about but not talked about because, well, us, we don't really want to be put on the stage for like, wow, you're a woman and you're an engineer and you're doing like,
Yeah.
you want
How'd you do it?
like, well, I did it all by myself. Like, you know, it's like, it's so different because I find in other spaces, people push into that and it becomes almost like their capitalist way of like ensuring that they get their share of the pie, which, okay, that's a strategy, but like I find it takes so much longer in, you know, audio industry land for changes to happen because the population isn't that high. And
Hmm.
then also, they're not the sort of people who want to make it about their womanhood or other gender identity, whether they're trans, which I have to say, I unfortunately can't point out a trans uh, engineer that I
Yeah.
know of, which is
Same.
yeah, that's upsetting in a different way because it's like you want them to have representation too. You want everyone to have representation, but it's so like under the table. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, you're right with the, there's so many things that are subversive. Two stories bring to mind. One is, there is a female that we graduated, and she is employed by a studio. Um, and I'm very proud of her. But I noticed on social media, she started saying things like, only female engineer in the Tampa Bay, like, I'm number one, I'm the best, because I'm the only girl that they let do this because I'm so good, basically. Like, she didn't, I don't think she knew that what she was saying was that. And that I also feel like there's a lot of internalized misogyny that women grow up with, and they don't even realize that when you are speaking like that and being like, yeah, I can do this and I'm a girl, that's how good I am, that you're still playing their game. And in fact, they're giving you head pats for being like, yeah, that's right. You tell those other girls that they can't do that. You're the only one, because all the other girls obviously can't do it, you know? And so I hope that this person changes their thought about their position as a female engineer, um, in a way that lifts us all up, because I think part of the issue when it comes to that is that there aren't enough. If you look around, we're looking around at this table, and I'm the only girl at the table. Well, it's not like I need to. There's only one girl spot. Like, oh, I got the girl seat, and so I need to be competitive. It's we need to more chairs at this table.
Mhm.
We don't even need to remove all these men. We need more chairs at the table then. Not saying we take anything away. I'm just saying that we put more chairs, so it's not just like, oh, this girl's got the girl chair. Good job, girl. Um, and then eventually, I have hope that it will change. Some of the most misogynistic stuff has been from old white men, usually. Well, pretty much always. Not always. Plenty from women, but old white men, especially just based on not knowing anything at all. There was something I needed to fix, which I did. We have a really nice piece of gear that's really old and
Mhm.
rare. And there's a really old tech guy who I'm not going to mention his name, but people send him their stuff all over the country to fix stuff. And because this is so rare, and because, with my background in audio electronics, I
Mhm.
think, I worked for Daking Audio, built stuff for him. I'm skilled at repairs in that. And so Dave wrote an email and said, hey, so and so, we have our piece of gear here, and it needs an issue. Here's the issue. Can you tell us what to check? I've got Melissa here so she can do um, any repair or whatever. So we scheduled a phone call, and I don't know if the guy knew that it was speakerphone or not, but I'm sort of taking notes as Dave is describing the issue to him. And he says, okay, well, check the relay. And then Dave's like, okay, well, after we do that, what should we check next? Um, Mind you, this is, to save us time. This guy knows. He goes, well, you're just going to need to get someone who knows some sort of electronics theory, not just some wire girl. He's never met me. He doesn't. The only reason he knows that I am
Mhm.
a female is because Dave said I've got Melissa here.
Mhm.
So, he's putting me into a box of a just a wire girl. I'm just a wire girl. I guess he keeps me in the closet. He lets me out to hook up wires, and then I go back in. That's all I can do. Um,
Also, what is that term? Where did the
yeah, get your wire. Some wire girl.
wire girl here?
Like maybe operators back in the day when they were
Oh
all female, and
yeah,
they're like patch cables and like
yeah.
that. Anything past that, you're gonna need to get someone with some electronics knowledge and a brain. Um, so that stuff, or I walking in as a technician to someone, and someone looking at me like, oh, is your tech guy going to be here soon? And I will confess to, there are many times where I've wanted a male with me as sort of a hall pass,
Mhm.
just like they're going to assume that guy's doing the hard stuff and that I'm just here, or handing screwdrivers to the man, because it's like, oh, it's going to be easier. My feelings are going to get less hurt, but it's bullshit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we just do what we keep doing, and talking about it in natural and organic ways, as opposed to, like I said, these, nothing against all the panels and stuff about being a woman in this, but it's like the people that really need to learn these lessons are they're not gonna be the audience to that.
No. And then also there's kind of this, I've been talking about how it's like, it is a traumatic experience that we go through on a regular basis if you want to get down and into it. And so it feels a lot almost like trauma porn to be put on display, like you were a victim of this thing, and so now we're going to, like, it doesn't feel healing. It doesn't feel like supportive in any way. It feels like performative and exploitive, I
Yeah,
think.
you're right. It feels gross. And because every time I've been asked to do that, it's been by a man. Well intentioned, probably, mind you, out of touch, but yeah. No, yeah, you're exactly right. Like, let's talk about this thing on a stage. Just and so we can say, like, look, we care.
Yeah,
Look, we found a bunch of women and they're talking about some fucked up shit. See? We're part of the solution.
yeah.
It's like, I don't think so.
But I do have to say, like, as far as like boots on the ground conversations about things, is that like when we've had conversations or other female colleagues have had conversations like about specific situations, it's felt way more empowered. And like, yeah, like it's felt like, okay, we can do something, even if it's as silly as me creating a swear jar so that we can like literally have an accounting of how much inappropriate stuff is being said in a classroom.
Oh, yeah, all the time. And I deal with that as an instructor too. You know, I
Mhm,
pick my battles. I do talk about feminism at some point,
mhm,
just in terms of there will be something where someone will say something that I'm just not going to let go.
mhm.
But otherwise, I think I tried to show up in a way that will I don't even need to talk about the reasons of why you shouldn't just be like, "Oh, she's good for a girl." It's
No,
like
because
I
Melissa's
just
good.
am. Right.
Melissa
Thank you.
is good. Literally, just so many people. They're like, "Oh, I need mastery." I'm like, "You need to go to Melissa. Like, you just need to, because Melissa's gonna make it like better." And then those people who have had their records then out immediately say to me, I didn't go to Melissa. Can I have Melissa's information because I messed up. I messed up a lot and I don't want to do this again. And I'm like, I tried to help you. I tried to be
Yep.
there. Um, but yeah, the people that have gone to you and then come back to me, they're like, Melissa is just so good at her job. Like
Thank
I
you.
yeah. So I think it just gets back to that. We just want to be seen as damn good at what we do.
Yeah. I just want to be seen for me, not as a part of I am a part of womanhood,
Hmm.
but I'm professionally, it's like irrelevant except for the fact that, in my opinion, because so often women are looked at with that good for a girl, we actually have to be better than our male counterparts just to be considered good for a girl. Which my response to that usually, if someone even jokes and says, "Oh, something for a girl," you drive like a girl. You're like, yeah, you could too if you tried harder. You know, could be like a girl if you tried. Um, because yeah, I don't. It's it's irrelevant except in my opinion. For some, we've had to try much harder
Hmm.
just to be looked at the same level.
Yeah. I never forget, there was a day you had left, and in the big studio, there was like, I don't know, like 15 dudes who were doing a session. And this was past when I had already done like Music Tech 4. And one of them comes running down the hall. Does anyone know how to make the Q mix work? I'm like, 7 and 8. It's always 7 and 8. It's always hardwired to that. There's notes everywhere. I walked in, I did and I walked out, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, how'd you?" I'm like, "It's literally, it's right there." And it's
Yeah.
so interesting how often that happens, where it's like the room full, and then you come in, and it's just like it's the most obvious thing. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of people just don't pay attention.
Hmm. We tend to pay attention. Details.
True. Yeah, details.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me,
You're
Melissa,
welcome.
and being so open. And
Yeah, no problem. It was my pleasure.
thank you.